Episode number 352, How to Use PraiseCharts in Your Worship Experience with Ryan Dahl. Let's do it.
This is the definitive podcast for helping you plan, create, and execute dynamic worship experiences at your church. Useful, practical content in the areas of production, worship, communications, first impressions, and more. This is Making Sunday Happen.
Hey guys, this week's episode of our podcast is brought to you by Experience Conference. This is a worship conference in Orlando, September 6th through the 9th. More details coming up on that. This week on the show, I welcome Ryan Dahl. Ryan has served churches like North Langley Community Church and Pacific Rim Church in Langley, British Columbia. Ryan is the founder and owner of PraiseCharts, and PraiseCharts serves worship leaders and churches with sheet music, chord and lyric sheets, arrangements, and more. I dive in with Ryan about the history of PraiseCharts, some big projects that they are working on, the best ways to search for stuff on their site, and more. We'll talk about all of it today. Hey guys, I want to tell you more about Experience Conference. It's happening in Orlando, September 6th through the 9th. It's at the Disney Coronado Resort. You'll worship with my friends Mac Brock, Meredith Andrews, Jonathan Taylor, Thrive Worship, and more. You'll also hear from great speakers like Scott Longer, Eddie Hoagland, and others. I've spoken at this event. Our team will be there this year. Make plans to come September 6th through the 9th in Orlando. You can get tickets at experienceconference.com. That's experienceconference.com. Hey guys, today I welcome Ryan Dahl. Ryan is the founder and CEO of PraiseCharts. Ryan, thanks so much for hanging out, man.
I love being here and talking to you. Love your set, love your camera, the little logo in the background, and all that looks great.
Dude, we know how to do it, and we do it for right here. If I were to turn the camera, it will all fall apart.
Let me tell you, if you went outside of my own window here, it's like my office is a bit of a mess, but the world doesn't need to know. So there we go.
That's right. Let's not tell them. All right. So you were telling me that PraiseCharts is almost 25 years old next year, right? So
yeah, that's right.
24 years of PraiseCharts, man. How's that feel?
Yeah. Oh, it feels kind of crazy, actually. I'm 52. I think I'm 52. I'm turning 52 in a couple of months. So it's like half my life has been with this. And as I look back on the years, it's been so many mountains, valleys, climbing uphill, sliding downhill, barely hanging on. I think we're in a really great, fun place. It's nice to have the stories to look back on, but some of the stuff that we had to go through in the journey, I don't know if I wanted to be there during the time.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is my kids are now, I got 4 kids, 3 boys and a girl, and they are ranging from 21 to 25 years old. So you can just see they've all grown up with me through this journey. And in 1998, it wasn't so common to have a job where you had more freedom. Like now we think it's easy to have a job and pretty much have access in your back pocket of your phone or a laptop. But back in the day, I was like, man, I would love a little more freedom. And I just kind of went after it, you know? Yeah. And then at the same time, I loved music. I loved worship. I loved notes, fonts, design, lists, technology, the computer. There's so many elements of PraiseCharts that are somehow woven into the heartbeat of what PraiseCharts is and has become over the years.
So we started in 2015. So I have 7 years of the roller coaster. So I can't imagine, adding another 15 years on top of that. So tell me about the roller coaster ride of entrepreneur small business.
Yeah.
And I have some stories, and I just know a slice of the pie of what you've been through. Man, how do you latch on to God's faithfulness and know the calling and all that?
Oh, I don't think I have as glamorous of a story of that. I'm not that great of a person of faith. Some days I just cried and stressed my, way through life. Let's be honest. It's just, that's how it was. But Some unique things about Praise Charts. Let me tell you about this. Is something unique about music publishing is that in the world that I'm doing, unless I'm just publishing hymns, I need to have permission to do it. So that's like basic copyright. If I want to make an arrangement of a hymn, no problem, go do it. I don't have to ask anybody. But somehow I decided to get into a world where I depended on the big corporate music publishing companies to trust me, because they didn't have to. So I want to say this in the context of like today we have such great relationships with like Capitol and Essential and some of these companies you might not even know exist, but then others like Integrity, Hillsong, lots of artists, lots of publishers. But the journey to get there was probably one of the biggest mountains to try to aspire towards a place of trust. Because imagine in 1998, I was just a 25-year-old who's calling up, hello, can I speak to, the vice president of publishing, and can you give me permission to create an arrangement of your song? And they're like, no. Yeah. So that the journey from going from I was a nobody, I had nothing to show for myself, to like I just needed one person to say yes, and then I just needed a few songs, and then I needed to make good on that, and then it was a slow progress. The next part of the journey, I would say, was like when some of the companies started to see that Praise Charts was kind of catching on, say in the mid 2000s, they had to grapple with, do we want to work with this guy? Or do we want to do this ourselves? It's just like an honest question that any publishing company is going to be like, is this like, we could do this, right, or should we let him do this? So that was a wrestle, because I had to somehow prove that I had my eyes on a platform that was worth them investing in. I mean, I can just imagine nowadays if anybody came along to some of them and they're 23 years old, I could see how they'd be like, yeah, I think we'll pass. Like, we got this, no problem.
Yeah.
So, it was a very personal struggle trying to be liked and trusted so that I could do the thing that I wanted to legally and appropriately.
Good.
So, yeah, there you go.
Man, that's awesome. So back at the beginning, you were a worship pastor at North Langley Community Church, right?
Yeah.
And then jumped full-time into Praise Charts, right?
Not quite that. Okay. I think the journey I take, and a lot of kind of, if you want to call it, entrepreneurs do this when they have a unique dream that, requires their own innovation and creating their own thing, is sometimes you got to have a job that pays the bills while you can kind of, some people call it moonlighting or whatever, but it's just like you got to do your thing on the side and be willing to work for 2 cents an hour. So I had to do that. I kind of went slowly from full-time and doing this on the side to half-time and doing it half-time. And then the honest truth of this is like a whole nother podcast, but we had kind of like a season of family crisis in our lives, which basically, it wasn't like a moral crisis, but it was like an all-encompassing family, like our lives were crumbling. And I stepped out of full-time ministry so that I could somehow pull the strings together of our lives together. And Praise Charts was just barely squeaking out enough to make a living. And the first days I went back to living in my parents' basement while I scraggled together enough to keep going. So, it was a bumpy road, not going from, I'm just going to leave my full-time job and now I'm going to have a full-time thing. That it wasn't that. Yeah.
Man, I'm glad that you bring that up, because I think a lot of people look to, companies that are out there, ministries that are out there, and either see that they might be bigger than they are, or have a perception, or definitely do not know what's going on behind the kitchen. Right. The plate might look awesome.
Yeah.
But we're over here scrambling to find the materials and the ingredients to cook the meals over here. And so it's interesting that you that you say that, and that you you bring it to light in that way.
Yeah.
All right. So in those early days, what problem were you trying to solve? And even now for the church, you know, there might be some of the same problems, but what problems were you really like, man, this needs a solution. I think I can go.
Yeah. I think I can tell you exactly what that is in the 90s in particular, at least I think this is what was happening, is the church was going through a transition where there was a wave of new music that was flowing in, and it was coming through like Integrity and a little bit of Hillsong and Vineyard. These were all kind of like movements that I'm sure there's a history of what brought those movements around, but oftentimes worship attaches itself to like the church kind of renewing and reinventing itself in some ways. And so as I remember in the early 90s, some songs and some worship leaders like Brian Dirksen, I don't know if you know his name, but he's, Come Now Is the Time to Worship and Refiner's Fire and Faithful One, and some of those like early acoustic guitar songs. And I had an acoustic guitar, and I was like, man, I just want to learn these chords. And I had my 12 people that I got together with on, every other week, and we'd play these songs and sketch them out on napkins and figure out what the chords were. But eventually, like, songs just started to keep coming. And I was like, oh, I want to sing that one. Oh, well, I just heard that song. That's such a great song. And the momentum of music started to pick up. And then as I was a worship pastor as well, I had bands. I had a trumpet player and a flute and a piano player and a bass. And I was like, well, now the song comes out and now I need music. And the music publishing industry, it was like they were on some slow conveyor belt, but the music writing industry, if you want to call it that, it was like they were on a highway, right? So the two were going at different paces. And in particular, a song like Shout to the Lord. Do you remember Shout to the Lord from Hillsong?
Yeah, Darlene, check.
Yeah, Darlene Check, right? So like that was the late 90s, early 2000s when that came out. And I just saw how people were responding to that. And there was no music for it. I was like, I need to find music. So I just started looking around for arrangers, writers, people that knew how to put notes on a page. And I discovered then that there was a whole bunch of other worship pastors who were like craving music because they wanted to, it's like they were out in Hawaii on a surfboard and all these waves were passing them by and they wanted to like stand up and catch a wave and flow with it, right? Like, yeah. I don't know if that's making sense. Good. So that's kind of what PraiseCharts was trying to do, was we've got to reinvent how music gets from the artist to the church stage and not take 4 months. And so today, that is super common. I mean, people write a song and it's on YouTube in an hour. But back then, there was just such a lag, and it was frustrating. To be slowed down, I guess, by that lag. So yeah.
You talked about licensing and copyrights. Yeah. I've dealt with some of that a little bit, and honestly, that scares me. In fact, we've probably not made the steps to do more ministry sometimes because it's like, oh my goodness, the copyright hurdle.
I know, right?
And so, man, how did you? And you talked about it a little bit, but how did you wrestle through wanting to be legal and more morally in check and all that?
Yeah. Well, if I'm totally honest, I don't think I was perfect I know I wasn't perfect in the early days. And I think I'm not trying to justify this, but I do see a number of companies where they're trying to like break a system or they're trying to like innovate. Sometimes they do things that are like a little bit in the gray. And trust me, I'm not trying to like justify things that I've done, but I'm just acknowledging it wasn't like I had 6 lawyers all on my team and I had everything perfect. Some nights I went to sleep like carrying the burden of guilt of, oh crap, I know that in the back end of my system, I'm not quite doing that thing right. But there was a core pulse, a core desire that I wanted get permission to do the song, make it available on my site, pay the appropriate royalty back to the artist, and that was the heartbeat of what I wanted to do. It was a little bit clunky getting that all together. But then in that clunkiness, I started to develop this vision of how it could be in the future. I could have somebody on my team who was dedicated to all the music publishing kind of intricacies. And that's actually what I have right now, is an incredible administrative team. They're very close. Some of my best friends, I would say, in the world work closely with me and help make sure that those T's are crossed and I's are dotted. And, we have folders full of thousands of contracts that we send out, get signatures, and it's a mountain for sure.
Now that it's more accessible online on YouTube or something, so I've spoken at several kids ministry conferences over the last 6-8 months, and this is especially prevalent in the kids ministry market. Is an artist does a song or does a video with that song, puts it up on YouTube, and a church, random church, will play that YouTube video inside their kids ministry or even adult worship experience. Just play it on the computer. You can see their cursor moving. I mean, like that, and so I think some people just don't know that that's illegal. Very highly illegal. So kind of walk me through your feelings on that, your stances on that. They're hey, not only are you doing something illegal, you're robbing from the artist, you're robbing from the creator. Walk me through that. Okay.
I will walk you through. I'll just preface this to be if any major publishers are watching this interview, please don't think badly of me because I'm just saying what I think. We're just having a conversation here, right? So, this is what I think is kind of happens in the church. And what has been most successful is when publishers and organizations watch what people actually do, and they look for ways to make that legal and as painless as possible. So there's that approach versus the other approach is watching what they're doing and then standing and saying, you must do these 7 legal steps before that can be legal, and sending them a guilt message to say, you can't do that. Because people in your kids ministry, I mean, all you want to do is just, you've had a hard day at work, whatever, all week. And you just want to have a good 45 minutes with your kids. You have great intention, of course. So, not that excuses all activities, but I'm just saying I have seen a company like CCLI, for example. I think that their primary orientation was, here's what the church is actually doing and what works. What can we do to build systems to make that legal?
Right.
And they've
one
been
blanket
hugely
thing, and you're covered.
Kind of, yeah. But just to note, it's some people think they could get a CCLI license and it gives them a license to speed on the highway and do everything because they have a license.
Right. So
it doesn't cover everything, but it covers a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that kind of approach that I think also has impacted me in PraiseCharts, that at the end of the day, a guy just wants to get to practice. He wants to download the music and he wants to hand it out to his team and play their songs. And they just want, how can we minimize the administrative steps between that? So it's up to me as an innovator, as an entrepreneur, to see that and to answer that, rather than to take a position of, I'm just going to see what you're doing and I'm going to tell you why what you're doing is wrong. That's not going to be successful at the end of the day, right?
Good.
So it's probably not a perfect answer, but I think it's a very realistic answer for what I see going on in the church. And I think we're getting to a place. CCLI does great. We work really closely with CCLI as well. And we have found that the publishers are quite willing to even cooperate with some ideas that PraiseCharts is bringing to the table to say, what if we just did this? And then everybody could get their money still.
Right.
which is appropriate. I'm not against artists getting paid. Anyway, so those are a few thoughts I have.
Good. I think one thing too that I've encouraged kids pastors, especially, and leaders to do is, if you don't know, if you can find the artist or the creator, which in kids ministry, they're pretty accessible. Contact that artist, because the artist can either put you in contact with the right, make sure you have the right permissions, or give you a discount if your ministry can't afford it, or even give it to you for free. But if you don't contact that artist, you're almost robbing them in a couple of places. Not that this is a guilt trip. I'm just coming at it here, and then we can talk about how to solve it. But you're pulling down from YouTube, which is illegal, and then you're not paying the artist, which is illegal, and you're also could be robbing that creator of the blessing of blessing you.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I think you come in with a great solution, especially on the music wise, because you kind of eliminate that middleman. You guys are handling the legality of it. Yeah. And it's an easy, okay, if I know that I purchased this and download it, I know that PraiseCharts has all the legal taken care of.
Yeah.
So that's really encouraging to see.
Yeah. And there's some, we'll add in that CCLI has some other licenses. They have many layers of licenses. So some of these things that you want to do with your children's ministry and stuff like that, there's ways that actually act out exactly what I've been saying. They have innovated to create a simple solution, but it does cost a few bucks, but it's worth it. Right. And then you don't have to call 67 different, artists. Right. Because,
Right. Good point. Okay. So how did you wrestle with that at the beginning? You're a worship pastor, and then you've morphed into an entrepreneur at this point.
Yeah.
So, and I feel the same. I was a video guy, still am, have that itch, but the business takes more than have time to be creative. How did you wrestle with that?
Yeah, I definitely did. I went into ministry. I had a couple of call them divine moments where I was 6, 8, or 10 years old, and someone had prophetically come and spoken to my mom because they saw me playing piano on a stage and said, "I believe the Lord is calling your son to pastoral ministry." And a couple of moments like that, which sort of added up in my young life. And I thought, man, I need to become a pastor because clearly that's what the Lord has said I should do. And so I did that. It was great, but it was also a real wrestle for me. And then at the point of when PraiseCharts was kind of birthing and I had all this fire and passion and ideas inside of me, it was a wrestle of, am I going to abandon the call of God on my life? So I would say this, whatever, I don't care. I'm just going to tell you that I think a plumber has just as much as an ability to be a minister and to do what he's called to do and or gifted to do as a pastor. In some ways, I just want to pull down this sort of high profile of a pastor and raise up the plumber to be people, just do what you're good at and what burns in fire inside of you. And if it's plumbing or if it's speaking or whatever it is, let's be the priesthood of all saints, right? So I think theologically started to own that when I carried my pastoral heart into my kind of entrepreneurial world. And then today, it's I want to be the same pastoral heart kind of person as I ever was. It's I almost want to run my business like I was pastoring it, And so I don't see God as having this kind of you are called to ministry and you are special, but you have left the ministry, and oh, how terrible it is that how many pastors have left and gone into business. It's just let people live, and let them carry their ministry into whatever they're doing. So I'm pretty passionate about that.
Good.
And that's where I come from. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Because I think that God can move you. You know, I was interviewing somebody recently about dreams. He was Wade Joy, the worship leader at Elevation. He's writing a book on dreams, and that, you know, God might move your dream. Like you might think it is this. Yeah. But he might have a totally different dream that he moves you to, or your dream needs to die for him to do what he wants to do in you. And if you don't follow that, I mean, if you didn't, PraiseCharts wouldn't be there, and you wouldn't have gotten to minister to so many worship pastors around.
Yeah.
All right. So bring me to today. What has PraiseCharts become today? How are you continuing to resource the church?
Well, so one of the things I do really enjoy, and this is kind of philosophically really built this into the DNA of PraiseCharts, is we want to work really well with other companies, and a lot of them are our competitors. So like companies like Loop Community, for example, is like, we compete with them, but I'm also like almost best friends with the founder of Loop. You know, I love those companies, and other ones like Worship Artistry and OnSong, and there's lots of innovative resource type companies. Even CCLI, my biggest competitor right now is Song Select. And we've just done a cooperative thing with them where we're linking back and forth. If you go into Song Select today and to PraiseCharts, you're going to see us promoting each other. So that's one of the most beautiful things. And even like on an industry level, like with companies like Capital and Essential, and I've just got such great friendships in those companies that it's a joy to come to work, and I don't have this burden of I got to prove myself to them. So I guess that's one of the things I want to say is I love working. I don't have a skeptical, negative view on like the Christian music industry and, it's all just business and people are just into money. It's like, I think it's filled with lots of different people. They're doing their best to try to resource, you know, the church and the world with great music, and overarchingly, I think there's such great songs coming out, and none of us could sing them all. So that would be like one thing I'd want to say. And then PraiseCharts has kind of come to a place where, well, let's just say this. In any given day, most sales that go on in PraiseCharts, here's a little window into like the technical back end of PraiseCharts. Most transactions are about $2.50, like in any given day. So we just have this wide swath of like impact in a very small way on like lots of people. And so the beautiful thing about having a business model like that is there's not a lot that can come and like destroy that. It's like if you put your hand in a pile of sand, you're just going to move the sand that's around your hand. You're not going to destroy the whole box. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So PraiseCharts is just made up of like just thousands and thousands and thousands of what are predominantly microtransactions that are having small impacts on lots of different churches, lots of songs. And then that kind of stability has allowed us even to survive like the pandemic, which did, well, I mean, maybe we'll talk about it more later, but it certainly took a strike at us. But somehow we were able to survive because there's this kind of like broad stability in what we do. And then the other beautiful thing from an entrepreneur perspective is once you build that kind of base, then you can start kind of experimenting with different things, and you don't need to necessarily make a living out of every little experiment, and some of them can fail, and that's okay. So if you look in PraiseCharts right now, you're going to see like lots of little experiments that are all running on top of this core base that kind of floats the boat. So that kind of is it's like a business mindset, and also it's actually what's happening in PraiseCharts. So I don't know if that helps, but that's from
You mentioned the pandemic. How did that? Did people not need as much sheet music?
Yeah.
What how did it hit you guys?
How I tell you exactly how it hit us is any kind of music that required people to sit or stand close to each other and basically breathe on each other or spit on each other. That music wasn't selling as well. So I say that kind of crassly, but like orchestration sales definitely took a nosedive because, a brass instrument, it's got that little spit thing, that I used to play trumpet, and like people don't want that stuff spraying all over when there's a pandemic going on. It makes sense. And choirs, people are standing like shoulder to shoulder and singing and breathing on people. So our choral music, the choral industry in general took a major hit. It was a part of what PraiseCharts does. But interesting, chord charts and multi-tracks grew because those are things you could do independently, right? Mm-hmm. You could play a track, nobody's breathing on each other. You could just play from a chord chart, which probably meant bands were simplifying. They were spreading out a little more. They were simplifying their music complexity. So in PraiseCharts, we've got like about 27 products, and I've got a dashboard that I look at every week or so. I could see all 27 products and like 3-year chart lines like this of exactly how they were impacted by the pandemic. And different types of music have different stories, and we have lots of types of music, of course. So I find it pretty fascinating.
Are you coming out of that? Are people coming back to choral and orchestra?
Yes, absolutely. Orchestra is on the rise. One of the things we did with our orchestrations, kind of innovations, you might say, is we started breaking down the parts more so that instead of buying for a full orchestra, you could buy just the string section or just the brass section, just to make more options for smaller groups to consume the music. And that went up. And choral music definitely took a major hit, but now like we are doing 3 times more choral sales this year than this time last year. And we're hoping to do another 3 or 4 more times next year. In fact, in a month or so, we're launching a brand new worship choir series right from PraiseCharts. And I'm super excited about it. So, yeah.
So you guys have done a few things over the last a couple, 3 years, maybe, that I'd love to talk to you about. So one is you kind of rebuilt your site. You kind of hit reset on the whole thing, right?
Yeah. We've done that a couple of times. It is like
super cheap. Websites are extremely cheap.
I know, just a quick $500,000 to pull it out of your pocket, you know, and
exactly right.
So it's very expensive, and you have to be committed to it, but it can be worth it as well. But one of the realities of being in a tech-oriented company, and in some ways PraiseCharts is like a tech company because there's a huge back end to it, is every probably 3, 4, or 5 years, you have to be willing to reinvent some phase of what you're doing. And so we've probably done that 3 or 4 times. We called what we just launched last December, we called it PC5 internally, which meant it was like the 5th major generation of PraiseCharts. And because, as you know, worlds like Google and other things like responsive design, that's been a whole thing. Now people are using their phones, whereas it used to be they would just use their laptops. So responsive design just means that your website has to be able to convert from a laptop screen to a phone screen and not turn into like a bunch of micro characters, right?
Right.
So that takes like redesigning every page. It's almost in the code. Every page almost has to have 4 different versions of how it would display based on its known context. So that's recoding. And then all of the copyright administration, we built our own backend database that could figure out who needs to get paid the micro pennies on every micro transaction. So that took a huge amount of investment. And then SEO, which in tech terms, we talk about that all the time, but that's search engine optimization, which basically comes to an understanding that the front end of PraiseCharts actually isn't PraiseCharts. The front end of PraiseCharts is actually Google, because that's where we all go to find the thing we want. And we just expect to type in, I want Chris Tomlin sheet music. How great is our God? You're going to type something like that in random order. It's not going to be a proper sentence, but you just expect that Google will give you exactly what you're thinking. And lo and behold, half the time it does, right? So we've had to invent how we can get, showcased when you're searching for something that we have. That's been a big venture of ours.
Yeah. And you guys have really worked on the search. Tell me about the search functionality on the site itself. Yes, Google too. But the site itself, you've made that more fluid. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. Some of these are kind of like technical questions, but I'm like interested in all this stuff. So hopefully your listeners are interested. But
I want them to know where to go to search for this and how they can find what they need.
Yeah. So an interesting thing about search is, like, when you go to Google, you just expect that you can spit out something. It doesn't have to be a sentence, and you don't even have to like spell it correctly, and it'll just know what you're thinking. So, but we wanted that kind of vibe and feeling in PraiseCharts. It used to be that if you went in and you didn't type the words in the exact order with no spelling mistake, you wouldn't get a result, which seems like a no-brainer. But when you actually have to go to a website and go, how can I make it so that we can almost interpret what people are thinking by the sloppy thing that they're writing in the little text thing, right? Because one of the things in PraiseCharts now, we'll have 40 versions of Joy to the World, and we've got all 270 songs by Chris Tomlin, and we've got there's just all these things. So you could just type in a couple words, and we still want to give you what you actually think you want.
Right.
So one of the cool things in PraiseCharts is if you start typing something, it'll try to feed the most popular, the most likely thing that you want will be at the top. It's almost like programming a robot to think, but that's a journey that we have been on and are still on, so that it's.
Tell me about song lists. You guys have done a great job about putting together song lists for people.
Yeah. Well, I used to be an Apple Music subscriber, and nothing against people that respond to Apple Music, but then I jumped over into Spotify, probably because I loved the song list DNA of it. Really inspired me, and no question, the new PraiseCharts has been inspired by Spotify. And I know Apple Music and other places have song lists as well, but I feel like Spotify just kind of caught on to that. People want like a collection of songs that somehow belong together. So the great thing about PraiseCharts for people to know is almost all of our song lists, they're not us just putting songs in an order of 20 songs. They're all coded to respond to the daily activity of what's going on in PraiseCharts. So they're all changing all the time based on new songs come in, if it fits the theme, if it's rising in popularity, all that kind of stuff. It's like a living organism. And I would highly recommend for some of your listeners, if you want to like go to like the top songs of 2022, top new songs, hot off the press. These are a couple of lists that are constantly changing and helping you to stay like current in your mind, at least as to like what music is coming out and what's worth listening to and considering for your church services. So good. Yeah, that's how the song lists work.
All right. I have a couple more questions for you, and then I'm going to play a game with you. So,
all right.
So what are some things that has really surprised you in the worship space over the last few years, maybe pandemic related or otherwise, maybe surprised, or what has encouraged you too?
What could I think as to what's encouraged me? I probably this is something that I find kind of interesting in the world of worship music is songs get written, and then we find that it's like we'll discover, oh, this song, there's life to this one. Like this song has legs. And then it's fascinating to watch how artists will like re-record that song in 4 different ways. Now there's like an acoustic version, there's a, big choir version, there's a small version. So that's kind of like interesting to me, even just watching on YouTube. Now there's interviews about the song, there's stories of the song, there's a lyric version, so you just see all this kind of like world developing around a song that is kind of like it's evolving in real time in front of us as well, because we have the internet is so accessible in real time to us, and YouTube is that. I think it's kind of fascinating to see, for example, the latest song that I'm discovering, this exactly what I'm speaking to you about, is Honey in the Rock. It literally came out last week by Brooke Lidgertwood and Brandon Lake. And so we put out our chart, but now I'm seeing it coming up on YouTube, and I see it on Passion, and I see an acoustic version. I see the song story version. There's just all this stuff. And the song is so great. It's so great to listen to it from all these kind of different angles, and fun to be kind of a part of that story of really great songs as well. So
good.
Yeah.
What's on the roadmap for you guys? What's coming up?
What's coming up? Well, like I was telling you before about the pandemic had definitely took a strike at the choral world. Traditional kind of choir as we know it is shifting. and so we're kind of excited to kind of really gear up and bring the worship experience into the choir. And I like have this vision of choirs being like a band of worship leader warriors versus the choir being the special performance piece during the offertory kind of thing. Like that's a bit of an old mindset. And so that's definitely something we're heavily invested in time and resources, money. I'm hiring arrangers and orchestrators and singers and all of that, making some really great resources for choirs to really make an impact in their church as a team of worship leaders and orchestra as well. I'm quite inspired by helping invent a new sound for the orchestra that makes it sound less like fanfare-ish and sort of, all these trills and twills. And there's a bit of a 90s sound that I'm trying to progress more into more of a cinematic rock orchestra sound, and just kind of keeping up with the times. So yeah, that's one thing. And then other technologies like worship keys. I don't know if you heard about that. We're given this away, this kind of main stage platform for people to find their computer more accessible to the keyboard when they play and lead worship on Sunday mornings. That's been great. And yeah, we just had like our staff meeting. We went and rented a hotel for a couple of days, and I met with my 5 core staff, and we sat around a couch and a fireplace for 3 days and just dreamt of things we want to do in the future. And there's no shortage of ideas on the table. So yeah.
And I found that too. That it's not the ideas that I struggle with. It's the time, staff, money, resources to get it all done. So yeah. All right. As we close today, can I play a little game with you?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay.
All right, here we go. This is going to be 5 rapid fire questions. You ready?
Uh-oh. Okay.
All right, here we go. All right, number 1 is going to be the most challenging. Here we go. Name 5 of the top worship songs from the 90s.
From the 90s?
Yep.
Okay. Oh. I don't know if Come Now Is the Time to Worship was one.
I'll give you that one.
Refiner's Fire. Open the Eyes of My Heart, Lord. You Are My All in All. We administer that one, so I'm throwing that one in there.
You mentioned one earlier.
And what's that? How great is our God?
Was How Great Is Our God? Yeah, I guess it was 90s.
Come on.
Well,
yes,
I'll give you a shout. We said shout to the Lord earlier, so I'll include that. All right, that is correct.
What was the number one?
I don't. So I looked this up and I couldn't find. Maybe I could not find the actual number one most popular.
Right.
It all kind of came in.
Yeah.
Google doesn't know how to translate the 90s apparently. All right, number 2. What is one misconception of worship leaders or artists? What do people get wrong?
That you got to sound like the recording, or it's not good enough. I think the misconception is, even if you're singing a song that somebody else wrote, you need to lead it like you wrote it. Find a way to put your own personality into it. Don't just copy other people.
Good. Who is your favorite new and upcoming songwriter or artist that we should be looking at?
Well, I'm loving almost everything that I see Brandon Lake doing. When I see him sing, the freedom, the way he dresses, it's just so much like, I'm just going to be myself. And if you don't like me, that's fine. But I'm really attracted to the spirit of individuality, and I see that in him. So I don't know him. So I'd like to meet him someday, but I'm inspired by him.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. 4, what is one thing that if worship leaders would focus on, it would really catapult their ministry?
I think authenticity is big in my mind these days. The danger of leading worship is that you can just regurgitate what other people have done. I kind of said that before, but you could basically lead worship by lining up 5 songs, downloading them from PraiseCharts, and just regurgitating them. And people want to know you're a real person. And I think there's a danger with this whole world of multi-tracks, and it's just like the whole service starts and we're on a click and we're in a program and there's no chance to be a human being in front of people. And we live in a world right now where people crave that. Could you just slow down for a second? Could you just speak to me like a normal person? Could you please just not pretend that you've got your life all together just for a moment? I get shivers in my spine just as I'm sharing that. I really believe in that.
Good.
So, yeah.
All right. When you think about the impact that God has allowed PraiseCharts to have on the worship industry and the church, what are some of the most proud or humbled moments that you think of?
Well, I'm starting to get a couple of emails every now and then that come to me. People are like, man, I just want to thank you so much for all these resources and how they are kind of freeing me up, taking the administrative burden, whatever it is. They just got their own personal story of how it's come alive in their church. And I think our customers are mostly worship pastors, but the people that we're reaching are actually, it's the 100 or 200 or 1,000 that those worship pastors are reaching. So that's kind of the humbling thing for me is I think, PraiseCharts has a reach. I don't know, we got a couple 100,000 people on our email list, but then I think, but that's actually several million people that we're impacting, because the real impact is when these songs get on stage. And if hopefully these worship leaders are encouraged to, have an authentic, personal, real voice as they lead the songs, some really great impact could happen. So, yeah.
It's awesome. Well, man, thank you for playing. And thank you for the time, man. It's really been a pleasure getting to know you, and I can't wait to see what God does. And just thank you for the time. Looking forward to getting to know you more.
All right. Thanks very much. This has been great.
When it comes to the stage display in your presentation software, have a clean layout. If your stage display boxes are on top of each other, or if it's too much to look at, it can be very hard for you to have clear communication with your team on stage. So I suggest having no more than 4 or 5 boxes at a time. Too much going on can be confusing and defeat the purpose. So here's my suggestion for your boxes. Your current lyric slide, the next slide of lyrics, a countdown timer, the time of day, and a notes box for special messages. Those are your 5 boxes, that's it. Keep your stage display simple and readable for your presenters on stage.
The show notes for this episode are available now at makingsundayhappen.com.
Hey guys, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss an episode of the podcast. You can also listen anywhere you listen to podcasts, and leave us a rating and review if you would. Next week will be a special treat as I welcome back to the show the author of The 5 Love Languages and many other books. Dr. Gary Chapman will be here, along with another incredible author, speaker, and pastor, Clarence Schuler. Gary and Clarence have been friends for decades, and they wrote a book together on race relationships. We're going to talk about healing racial divides in your congregation. We'll also talk about how that relates to the Sunday worship experience, how to make Sunday happen, what things you should be doing on stage and in your services that will help you reach more people in your community. Very informative chat with both of these men next week. We'll go out there and create some incredible worship experiences this weekend. I'll catch you next week.
Making Sunday Happen is a production of the ministry of 1230 Media. For show notes, archive episodes, and more free resources for your church, visit makingsundayhappen.com.